Today, I want to talk about Perfect Dark. No, not that one. We've already done that one. Today, I'm talking about this one. Perfect Dark Zero is the 2005 sequel or prequel to Rare's N64 hit Perfect Dark, and I've hated on it pretty much every day since its release. To my surprise, this game was received quite well by critics of the day, with scores ranging from 6s to 9s out of 10s. A critic at GameSpot felt that Perfect Dark Zero champions the Xbox 360 with its excellent assortment of single and multiplayer game types, as well as its incredible good looks and dynamic, intense action. IGN criticized single-player aspects such as the enemy AI being bad, saying they never display any advanced assault tactics. GameSpy noted that the graphics were a stunning look at what the 360 hardware is capable of, but also stated that the animation is a little too slow and sometimes creates an unwelcome sense of cartoonishness. Game critics lamented, it took Rare a whole console generation to do it, and the wait wasn't really worth it. So yeah, in the end, Zero didn't really meet expectations, and I mean, how could it? The original Perfect Dark was, well, perfect, or at least as close as you could possibly get on the N64. It was essentially GoldenEye, but better in every single way. It had reload animations, voice cutscenes, the glorious combat simulator, an expansive story with twists and turns, a co-op and counter-op mode for said story, aliens, the Callisto NTG, amazing lighting, but yeah, enough about that. Today is all about the prequel, so let's dive right in, shall we? Does anyone remember Perfect Dark Zero? The story in this game is more or less your standard affair. First off, it's a prequel, but we once again play as Joanna Dark, who at the start of the game is just a bounty hunter working with her father to catch some dude named Nathan Ziegler. And of course, the job goes sideways, tossing Joanna face first into a way larger conflict. It's one of those wrong place, wrong time situations. A few missions later, Joanna's father is killed by this game's odd job, Mayhem. She's then rescued by Daniel Carrington, who then recruits her to the Carrington Institute. From here on, Joanna's mission is to avenge her father's death and stop Datadyne's leader, Zhang Li, who's looking for something called the Graal. I'm not 100% sure what the Graal is, but I think it's this platform here. The game leaves it kind of vague. In any case, he intends to use it to turn himself into a god and rule the world? You know, I actually have no idea what his end goal actually is. It's almost not even worth getting into. But all in all, I did enjoy the levels. The places you visit, just like in the first game, are diverse and interesting. From a neon-soaked Hong Kong nightclub to a secret underwater lab in the middle of the ocean. From the lush rainforests of the Amazon to the sun-drenched dunes of Africa. Each locale has its own vibe, aesthetic, and music. However, there were times during the story where I was just left scratching my head. For example, you're a super spy in the future, right? Flying cars, lasers, all that goodness. And out of nowhere, you run into these two Wild West assholes called the Brothers.
Ready to go to work, Brother Clay?
I believe I am, Brother Virgil.
Chandra, can you read me?
Pleased to make your acquaintance, Miss Dark.
Huh?
And Lou.
Chandra, where are you?
Holler all you like, girl. We're here to collect our bounty.
They just randomly show up in their stupid dusters and 10-gallon hats looking like they're straight out of a spaghetti western or something. On top of that, and this is the most confusing part, they're not even important to the story. You don't see or interact with them at any point before this, and you gain nothing from killing them. This entire encounter is just strange, and it feels very out of place. Know what else is strange? The fact that this game's a prequel. It's been eating at me for years. Never once have I ever wondered what Joanna's formative years were like. I mean, who cares? The last time we played as Joanna Dark, the mission started with corporate espionage, but ended with us helping one alien species in their fight against another species of alien dinosaurs on a decrepit planet somewhere in space. By the time you reach the end of the game, the woes of mankind seem very trivial in this new interstellar setting. But sure, let's just take all that amazing sequel setup, crumple it into a ball, and slam dunk it in the trash to tell a story no one really wanted in the first place. But this game does have a few redeeming qualities about it. For example, you can customize your loadout before each mission. This means you can plan ahead and pick the right weapons for the occasion, plus you won't be forced to use weapons you don't really like. This feature really came in handy on the Jungle Storm mission. You have to defend a dropship against a ton of enemies. I tried a few different loadouts and failed every time. Turns out that sprinting around, mowing everyone down with an M60 and Viblade was the way to go. Who would have thunk it? I also ended up using the Viblade for the final boss fight against a roided up Zhang Li and absolutely rinsed him. I'll get into this more later, but in the fight you're supposed to steal his Viblade and use it on him. That's the entire gimmick, but I just spawned with one. Bit of an oversight maybe, but I don't really care. Even pushing aside those little irritants and stupid quirks, there are still two major issues with this game that kneecap the entire experience. They are the movement and the cover mechanics. The movement is just the absolute worst. It's very sluggish yet floaty. It's like everyone's trudging knee deep through honey, but at the same time it's like they're all on ice. On top of that, there's this terrible inertia mechanic and knockback, so when you get shot, the hits push you ever so slightly away from the source of damage. This was a thing in GoldenEye and Perfect Dark, so it's not new, but combined with the ice, honey, and inertia, it can be very frustrating. For example, if you take consecutive hits from multiple enemies, a mounted gun, or a flying enemy, you just get pushed back harder and harder each time until you hit a wall or they stop shooting. You're essentially stun locked, and it's a real piss off, especially when you're almost in cover but you get hit by a stray bullet and it pushes you away. The cover mechanics, while a neat idea, are just cumbersome and half-baked. You have to be right next to a wall to activate it. I mean, obviously right, but no, your barrel has to be poking into the wall for the prompt to even show up sometimes. And when you're in cover, you can't move. You're just glued there. Sometimes this doesn't matter, but more often than not, while you're trying to find the enter cover prompt, the enemy will just push or get around you and you'll have to exit cover to shoot them anyway, so you're better off just not even using the feature unless you absolutely have to. This reminds me of another game with the same mechanic. Well, two games I guess. Rainbow Six Vegas 1 and 2. I know these games are like comparing apples to oranges, but hear me out. In Vegas, as long as you're close-ish to an object you can cover on and hit the cover button, your character snaps to it. Then you can move along said cover as you please. Come back to Perfect Dark Zero and you can't do either. These two things alone would have made the use of cover in Perfect Dark Zero way better and less clunky. I would say the gunplay kinda sucks too, but games released around this time were still kinda getting their shit together, at least on console. Every game seemed to have their own weird control oddities, like dead zones for joysticks that were way too large, inconsistent aim acceleration, low FOVs, and accuracy bloom. So the gunplay being kinda subpar is to be expected as it comes with the territory. Circling back to the main missions and campaign, one thing to note is that difficulty doesn't really operate in the traditional Rare way. In this game, difficulty doesn't alter which or how many objectives you have on any given level, like it did in, say, GoldenEye or Perfect Dark. This time around, it's more in line with modern difficulty scaling, where the higher the difficulty, the more damage you take or the more accurate enemies are. For the sake of review, I played through on Secret Agent, and it was challenging but fair. As a matter of fact, the only mission I really had a lot of trouble with was Bridge Assault, but even then, the only reason I struggled was because Jonathan kept getting folded like a wet paper towel. Luckily, after Bridge Assault, it's on to the final boss fight against a roided up Zhang Li, and as I mentioned above, I cheesed the hell out of this fight by just bringing my own Viblade. On my second try, that is. The first time around, I fought him for 20 minutes, ran out of ammo, then quit. He just kept jumping from platform to platform to platform, shooting at me while sucking the life out of his soldiers to regen his health. Every once in a while, he'll jump down to attack you with his Viblade. If you successfully dodge it, he'll trip on his shoelace and drop the blade. You're supposed to quickly pick it up and use it on him before he force grabs it back. That's the gimmick. Unfortunately for me, on my first attempt, he never once jumped down to me, so I just assumed it was bugged. In the end, this certainly isn't the worst final boss fight I've ever seen, but it's definitely in the conversation. So I know I haven't mentioned it yet, but Joanna is sexified to the max in this game, constantly clad in tight bodysuits, not to mention her comically oversized fuck me eyes. It's a real far cry from her aesthetic in the original. I know they kinda gussied her up for the remake, but on the N64 she 100% looks like a middle school teacher, and not even one of the fun ones who teach sex ed on TV late at night. She's more like one who would staple a disciplinary letter to your t-shirt so your mom sees it as soon as you get home and grounds you for the entire long weekend. I know this is a prequel, but I can't take her seriously. She seems just as likely to start stripping for the guards as she is to shoot them. And it's not just her, all the other characters got a boost in the sex appeal department too. They all wear lowrider jeans, skimpy outfits, or skin-tight bodysuits. I mean, look at Mayhem. Yeah, like Mayhem, but Mayhem. It looks like she just took a tablecloth, cut it to shit, and superglued it to her body. She's wearing a fucking tea towel in the dead of winter, or in the Alps, whatever. Well, at least she's got the dominatrix boots and gloves. I mean, she looks sticky, but hey, I guess it's form over function, right? The eye candy isn't the worst thing in the world, but it's so up in your face that it just comes across as cheesy. Even the dudes are no better. They all have this physique of a career triathlon participant who trains from sunup to sundown and only rewards himself with one extra gulp of water as a cheat meal. There are only 2 fat guys in the entire game. Again, not a huge deal, but it's a little cheesy. Going back to Joanna for a sec, I find that in the original she had her own identity, but here they just dumbed her down into an arrogant, bratty, insufferable female version of James Bond.
Didn't anybody tell you? Smoking kills.
Filthy habit.
Maybe this was deliberately done, to illustrate the changes in her demeanor and maturity between the 2 games so we the player have a better idea over how much she's matured. And that would be okay, but she's so irritating sometimes where the intent behind why doesn't even matter.
Whew, that was hot work. Boy, do I want a cold beer.
What I want is.
Answers? Here you go.
Mr. Steinberg, you have our guest? My condolences, Miss Dark, on your father's untimely passing.
Who? What?
To start, I'm Daniel Carrington, founder of the Carrington Institute.
Carrington? Ziegler said a Carrington hired.
You and your father to retrieve him before Datadyne could. He and Dr. Cano were working on a computer program that could translate.
You're confusing me with someone who cares.
Your father's death was a consequence of Zhang Li's pursuit of technology, which Ziegler's program's helping them to locate.
Again with the confusion. All I care about is putting a bullet in Zhang Li and his bitch daughter.
Really? Mayhem is presently using the Ziegler-Caro program to decode the glyphs at a dig site in South America.
Then I really hope that's where this bird's headed.
In terms of weapons, Perfect Dark Zero has a lot on offer, most of which you'll recognize from the original Perfect Dark, although a lot of the cooler weapons from that game were omitted from this one, which makes sense for weapons like the Reaper, Mauler, Callisto NTG, Phoenix, and Farsight as their alien weapons, and we haven't seen aliens yet. And the K7 Avenger was still in testing during the first game. Hell, even the Falcon 2, Joanna's signature weapon, hasn't been made yet. We're still on the Falcon. But most of the returning weapons have been altered in one way or another, like the CMP-150's target lock function from the original being swapped to a shitty hologram, or the Falcon's pistol whip being swapped to an ejectable self-shooting magazine. The Magnum also had its pistol whip function changed, which makes sense as this game has a dedicated melee button where the original game didn't. But the Magnum is especially neat. It shoots like a revolver should, but its secondary mode is a decoy shot. You fire it quietly and it makes a loud bang on impact. In theory, you'd use this to distract guards and such, but I never once had the opportunity to do so. If you mash the fire button, you can fan the hammer, which again is really cool, but in game it kinda sucks. I could never activate it consistently enough to rely on it. Plus, unarmored enemies typically die in one shot, so fanning isn't really needed. They could have made the Magnum legendary if they had fanning the default fire from the hip mode. Then when you ADS, you can make precise shots. sights. While we're on the topic of aiming down sights, I do really like the implementation of contact-sensitive zoom levels on scoped weapons. What I mean is, essentially how much you depress the trigger dictates the zoom level. It's very user-friendly and ensures you don't need to cycle through zoom levels in the middle of a gunfight. Along with secondary functions, some weapons even come with tertiary functions like adding a flashlight to the P9P or DWP5 or a silencer to the FAK-16. And while neat, I went the entire campaign without using these tertiary functions once, although seeing as how silencers add accuracy in this game, knowing about these tertiary functions would have made a lot of fights easier, especially those longer ranged engagements with the FAK-16. Lastly on the weapons, this game's rocket launcher is absolutely fucking horrendous. It's just two tubes welded on top of one another. This thing's huge. I know it's a rocket launcher, but it's in the same world as plasma rifles, an SMG that can create a hologram of its user, and the Super Dragon, a rifle with a built-in semi-automatic underbarrel grenade launcher, so there's really no need for it to be this bulky and badly designed. So I'll concede, after playing through the entire campaign, I've come to realize that it's not too bad. In fact, there's a lot I actually like about it. The locales are diverse and interesting, the music is good, and the action is non-stop from start to finish. But now I want to pivot over to the combat arena, and full disclosure, this is where most of my gripes and frustration with this game lay. The combat simulator was arguably the best part of the original. With its amazing level of customization, it made for endless replayability, alone or with friends. This iteration, however, has been neutered, with drastically less customization options and content when compared to the original. I'm actually impressed that the N64 version still crushes this game with its level of content. And I mean, they tossed almost everything. No more one-hit kills or slow-mo mode, no more custom team options, no more being able to select the music, and the character customizer is just gone with the wind. Above all that, I absolutely hate the omission of a one-hit kill modifier. At least you can do custom weapon sets still, but even then, the weapons aren't all that amazing themselves. In any case, the combat arena is broken up into two parts, Deathmatch and Dark Ops. Deathmatch is similar to the original game. You select a mode, a level, a weapon set, and customize it all to your liking. Well, in this case, your very restrictive liking. Once you get into a game, you spawn into this room surrounded by all the weapon pickups you selected along with a teleporter to the level. I'm really not a fan of this. It feels like a needless extra step. Why have weapon pickups on the level if I can just get them in this room? On the flip side, why have this room if there are weapon pickups in the level? I don't see the point. It kind of feels like they had two different ideas on how to do this but couldn't agree, so they just said fuck it and added both. On top of that, the spawn room separates you from the action, making it feel less tense and frantic. The last thing I want in my arcade FPS deathmatch is downtime. Throw me in, coach. Oh, and to add insult to injury, if you end up playing free-for-all against bots, they all just end up fighting one another in this room and rarely even making it to the main level, which makes no sense. Why do the bots even need the spawn room anyway? Why do I? Why do you? I don't see what's so wrong with just placing you in the level. However, this room would be a great feature for Dark Ops, the other half of Combat Arena. And compared to Deathmatch, Dark Ops is a completely different beast. The best way to describe it is that it's a CSGO clone. You play rounds where you need to face off against the other team to complete an objective or wipe them all out. Each player has one life. If you win, you can buy better equipment with money earned from said rounds. I remember Counter-Strike on the original Xbox being very popular around the time of this game's development. Maybe that's why they thought it'd be a good idea to add this mode, but I just don't see the point in it. This game's movement and controls are way too slippery and loose to facilitate competitive modes. Also, enemies are absolute bullet sponges. This slows the combat down to a snail's pace and basically eliminates the possibility of a risky play being successful. These things combined don't really make for a fun competitive game mode. Lastly, I was just talking about the spawn room, and as much as I hated it, Dark Ops could have made great use of it. It could have served as a buy room instead of using a menu, albeit the menu works fine, but if you must have this stupid room in the game, use it here, not in Deathmatch. The levels in Combat Arena are decent and serviceable. Temple is wicked, so is Urban, and Desert makes for some really fun sniping. But the real standouts are Temple and Facility. Yep, that Temple and Facility, straight from GoldenEye. Temple, or Ruin as it's called in this game, is showered in golden light from all the lit braziers, and it looks like the temple was built to hide some alien structures, which as it turns out it actually was, so that's awesome. Ruin's layout is also very faithful to the original. The only major difference is that this iteration is much smaller and more claustrophobic. But this change doesn't hinder the level all that much. As a matter of fact, I'd argue that it's actually an improvement. And Facility is no different. Its layout is pretty much one-to-one compared to earlier iterations, and as opposed to getting a futuristic facelift, this game's version has this dilapidated base aesthetic. With collapsed ceilings in the tank rooms and cracks in the walls, it's just in an overall state of disrepair, and I dig it. It's like this is all that remains after Bond blew the place up in GoldenEye. Fun little thing I noticed, for some reason on this level the AI just refused to go anywhere past the locker room into the tank rooms, and if they spawn in the tank rooms they just beeline it out of there. They ignore everything else. You could be shooting at them and they won't care. It's just a super weird thing. Maybe the tank rooms are haunted by the ghost of Dr. Doak. In any case, both are great remakes of two iconic levels, and they were an absolute treat to play once again. You know what? I'm starting to think that maybe Perfect Dark Zero isn't that bad. I mean, I do have some serious gripes with the movement, cover mechanics, and writing. And does it measure up to the original? Absolutely not, but it's still a decent sci-fi action game once you get over some growing pains in its gameplay. But what about all of you? Did you remember Perfect Dark Zero? Did you like it? Did you hate it? What do you find were the biggest downgrades between this game and the original? Let me know down in the comments. As for me, I'm out. It's rush hour, so I'm gonna go play some shitty rap music way too loud out of a Bluetooth speaker on public transit. But before I go, I want to thank you for watching. I appreciate it a lot, and have yourself a wonderful day.